Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the singing of the first verse of the national anthem. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. The President of the University.
Okay, good morning. Mr. Rector, members of the Board of Visitors, students, colleagues, family, and friends, welcome to final exercises. My name is Jim Ryan. In addition to being president of UVA, I am your host for today's ceremony, and most importantly, I will also officially award the degrees. Today marks the end of the 196th academic session, and we're here to celebrate and confer degrees on students from 9 of the university's schools. The School of Medicine, you see how this is going to work. The School of Law, the School of Engineering and Applied Science, a tough act to follow. The Darden Graduate School of Business Administration. The School of Architecture. The School of Nursing. The McIntyre School of Commerce. I'd like everyone to cheer for this next school, the School of Continuing and Professional Studies. And last but not least, our newest school, the School of Data Science. Today, we celebrate students and families who worked incredibly hard to get to this point, including some who overcame enormous challenges. Everyone here has a story to tell. One of today's graduates, for example, is a father earning his bachelor's degree 24 hours after his daughter walked the lawn yesterday. Another is Gabriel, the son of my UVA law school roommate. Some are veterans completing their education after serving our country. Others are the first in their families to graduate from college. We have one graduate who is 80 years old and several who are 19. All of those stories, all of your stories are important, and every graduate has earned this moment of celebration, as have their families. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge graduating student athletes who cannot be here today, including members of the softball and women's golf team who competed over the weekend. I'd also like to welcome back the women's track and field team who yesterday won the ACC championship. This is the first time since 1987. I'd also like to remember 4 members of this class who passed away before they were able to graduate. Michael McFarland, who is receiving a posthumous degree from the School of Data Science. Mark Rockwell Pate, who studied in the Darden School of Business. Tessa Wiseman at UVA Law, and V.D. Argawal, who was admitted to Darden but passed away before she began her studies. These students will be remembered and honored here by all those whose lives they touched. I'd also like to recognize several university leaders who are retiring or departing this year, including Provost Ian Balcom, University Librarian and Dean of Libraries John Unsworth, Interim Dean of Students Sigrid Rucker, Dean of the McIntyre School of Commerce Nicole Thorne Jenkins, and Senior Vice President for Operations and State Government Relations Colette Sheehy. Each of these leaders has shaped the university in profound ways, and I'm grateful to them for their service. And they deserve a round of applause. I'd also like to acknowledge the legendary John Castine, who passed away earlier this year. He served this university as president for 20 years, from 1990 to 2010. Finally, I'd like to offer, that's worth applause for sure. Finally, I'd like to offer some thanks. First, thank you to the U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command Band from Fort Eustis, Virginia, which is performing our music today. Thanks to the members of our ROTC programs who presented the colors. Thanks to the UVA Sustainability Office and our Balloon Brigade volunteers for collecting balloons for UVA Health Children's today. I'd also like to offer a huge thanks to our talented staff who work hard all year and then put in tremendous effort to make our grounds look especially beautiful for this weekend and to make this ceremony special for all of you. Particular thanks are due to Cecil Banks, our Director of Major Events, and his entire team, who are miraculous at what they do. I'd also like to thank our outstanding faculty, who have served not simply as teachers and colleagues, but also as mentors and friends. Please join me in giving them a big round of applause. Okay, if you will indulge me, I'd also like to ask you a favor. Today is my daughter Phoebe's birthday. I know. I wonder if on the count of 3 we can all say happy birthday, Phoebe. All right? Really loud. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Phoebe! Thank you. It'll make up for me not getting her a present yet. Speaking of family, I'd like to take a moment to congratulate and thank all the parents and grandparents, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, family and friends in the audience today. Together, you have supported our students, your students, in countless ways. You've helped pay tuition, you've offered encouragement, you fed them when they're home on break, you comforted them when they needed comforting, and you nudged them when they needed nudging. This has been a momentous journey for everyone, including all of you. No one makes it to graduation on their own. To all the families and friends in the audience, today is your day too, which is why I would like to ask all of our graduating students to stand, turn toward the audience, and give a round of applause to those who helped you on this journey. And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to offer my sincere congratulations and gratitude to the talented and passionate class of 2025. You have been through highs and lows during your time at UVA, many of you starting as the effects of the pandemic lingered and enduring the tragic shooting in 2022, which injured Mike Hollins and Marley Morgan, who is graduating today. And it also cost the lives of 3 fellow students, Devin Chandler, Lavelle Davis Jr., and Deshaun Perry, who we remember and honor today. You are entering a world that is uncertain and somewhat volatile, as many graduating classes have in the past. You cannot always control what happens, but you can control what you do in response. I know you will choose wisely and courageously because you have done so time and again while on grounds. The grace and strength of your class has held this community together during times of grief and lifted us up during times of celebration. I hope and trust that you'll look back on your years here as some of the most important of your lives, and that you'll remember both the challenges and the joys. There is, after all, much joy to be found in this world, as you have already shown us. Most importantly, you have made this university a better place, and I have no doubt you'll do the same for the world you're about to enter. So with that, let's begin this honorable and joyous ceremony through which we will welcome all of you into the worldwide community of University of Virginia graduates. Thank you.
The Rector of the University.
Good morning. Oh, we can do better than that. Good morning. There we go. On behalf of the Board of Visitors, I extend warm greetings and congratulations to all the students, parents, faculty, staff, and colleagues at the University of Virginia. This is a day to celebrate the achievements of you, our graduating students, as well as the family and friends who have supported you through this journey, some of whom may be with you here today. Before I introduce our speaker for this commencement, I would like to share some comments with our new graduates. As a first-generation college graduate and a triple who, I've experienced firsthand the value of an education from this amazing university. It changed my life. This is my last year on the Board of Visitors. On June 30th, I will have served a total of 12 years, and it has been one of the honors of my lifetime. I say this every year, but it is worth repeating. I hope, with the knowledge and skills you have acquired at UVA, that you will pursue a life of purpose, of meaningful accomplishments, lasting relationships, and personal fulfillment in all that you do. I also hope you will choose a life of service in some way. I encourage each of you to think about what you want your legacy to be. not just in your profession, but in your family, your community, and your world. Please remember, this great university is a living, breathing organism. Your time here was different than mine, and it will be different than the time of our incoming first-year class later this year. Yet some things always will remain part of the UVA DNA, providing a world-class educational experience, the extraordinary commitment to student self-governance, and the honor system, the special relationship between our students and faculty, love of our athletic programs, and a special shout out to the women's swim dive team, who has now won not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 consecutive national championships. And I have a strong suspicion that my successor next year will be congratulating them on their 6th consecutive national. And of course, this majestic and magnificent lawn designed by our founder, Thomas Jefferson. So as this graduation day fades into the background of your life, you can be proud of what you've accomplished here and whom you have become. As you continue to achieve additional successes, which I know you all will, don't forget to come back to Charlottesville. Participate in defining the future of this university. You will always be welcome here. I'd like to close by reading a passage from The Honor Men, written by Corks and Curls editor James Hay Jr. in 1903. Quote, "If you live a long time and, keeping the faith in all these things, hour by hour, still see that the sun gilds your path with real gold and that the moon floats in dream silver, then, remembering the purple shadows of the lawn, the majesty of the colonnades, and the dream of your youth, you may say in reverence and thankfulness, I have worn the honors of honor. I graduated from Virginia." Congratulations and Godspeed. Wahoo wah. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I'm going to go off script for a minute. I'll take Rector's privilege here. I've been very fortunate since I stepped on grounds in August of 1983 as a first-year student and have been part of this community to have worked with some of the greatest, brightest, extraordinary people in the world. I just think of John Colley, my PhD advisor at the Darden School. He was amazing. Boots Meade, you name it, Larry Sabato. We just have so many great professors, and working with them has been a real honor. I've also been very fortunate in my business career to work with a number of dignitaries and leaders of industry, truly visionary, amazing minds that have changed the world. Since I've been on the Board of Visitors for the last 8 years, and especially in my last 4 as Vice Rector for 2 years and then Rector, I've had the opportunity to work with an individual who I think is truly very, very close, if not at the top of that list. He's a visionary. He cares deeply about the students, the faculty, the administrators, the staff. He is the epitome of the saying great and good. So if you would please welcome me and give a rousing round of applause to the person who I believe is the best college president in the world, Jim Ryan. I'll now introduce our keynote speaker. Cedric Bernard Rucker, a 1984 graduate of the university, currently serves as special advisor to the Vice President and Chief Student Affairs Officer, a role he assumed in March 2025 after serving as interim Senior Associate Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students since August 2023. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Mary Washington College, now the University of Mary Washington, and a Master of Arts from the University of Virginia. He studied abroad in Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay. Although Dean Rucker spent most of his career at Mary Washington, he began UVA as Assistant Dean of Admission in 1983. In 1989, he returned to the University of Mary Washington, serving for 10 years as Associate Dean for Student Activities and Director to the Woodward Campus Center. In 1999, he was promoted to Associate Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Student Life until his retirement in 2022. In recognition of his exceptional service, the University of Mary Washington renamed its University Center in his honor. Originally planning to join the Peace Corps post-retirement, very ambitious, Dean Rector returned to the university instead, and we are deeply grateful for that. He plans to retire this summer to spend more time with family and to travel. He has already visited 116 countries. Dean Rector is an omnipresent figure on grounds, living on the lawn and walking the academical village early in the morning and attending just about every student event he can to fit into his hectic day. At UVA, he helped guide the Division of Student Affairs through a time of growth and transformation. He is a member of the Raven Society, the oldest and most prestigious honor society at the university, and a recipient of the Z Society's Pale Z Award. In addition to his work with students out of the classroom, he taught sociology and gender studies courses at the University of Mary Washington. He also held public service roles with the Commonwealth of Virginia as a member of the Board of Medicine, the Commonwealth Transportation Board, and the House Ethics Advisory Panel. His many accolades include the Living Legacy Award from Richmond Public Schools and the Eagle Beyond Compare Award from the University of Mary Washington. That's pretty cool, the Eagle Beyond Compare, I like that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dean Rector.
Good morning, everyone. It's always a delight for me to be in the presence of students, especially such distinguished students as yourselves. I'm excited about this. I'm about to take you on a journey. Please follow. I am not supposed to be here. I want you to know this is not imposter syndrome. I find myself standing before you having no idea how this happened. Honestly, there was no plan, no script, no outline that would approach what would ultimately be revealed. I'm just a guy from Richmond, Virginia. An inner city kid who grew up in the projects. One who was not supposed to rise to anything much, simply at best to be a cog in the system. Like many around me, most promisingly end up working in one of the city's renowned factories or tobacco warehouses. Wearing the banner of commencement speaker was certainly not in the cards. Yet, here I am. This guy who sprang from the bosom of segregated South, with limited prospects for escape from a system of frigid restraint, looking down mobility based on a one-drop reality surging through the social structure of everyday life. It must be said that even though these constraints were supposed to be loosened with the Brown versus Board of Education decision of 1954, my state and region of the country held on tightly to a structure as unequal, unfair, and in many instances, cruelly caste-like for many more years. I know that there are many who think that this time frame existed beyond our contemporary consciousness, but I am very much one who journeyed through that period. This Eisenhower baby, yes, 1950s, experienced the structural impediments that drew lines not to be crossed, doors not to be entered, fences and ropes that separated, and parts of town where one was not supposed to be found after certain times of day. Not just a part of a far-flung history of our nation, but my living reality, in many aspects lasting through my teenage years. There were an assortment of other complications beyond the walls of segregation, anchored in the rights of states to determine which residents would actually enjoy the full weight and measure of citizenship. I was born a sickly kid, something discovered on the day of my birth. Once, I was redirected to the right hospital after being born in an ambulance that was initially sent to the white hospital by mistake. Officiants labeled me a dirty baby because of that destination era. I was diagnosed with a heart valve disorder, one that would lead me to have 3 surgeries before the age of 12. Complicating matters even further, I had asthma, the cruelest of challenges for a child wanting to be active like so many others. I still remember trips to the emergency room because I could not breathe, could not catch my breath, wheezing for air. Such a complicated existence as one sought to navigate youth. With all of this, there was a ray of light. Books, literature, family, and educators invested trying to make such an uncomfortable journey meaningful. Since I was restricted in many ways from active engagement, I fell in love with reading, learning more about the world around me, and more importantly, beyond my scope. I admire the tenacity of my relatives, ever investing in the possibility of a world that they themselves hoped for, but ever seen beyond reality. My grandmother treasured me. She gave me confidence at every turn. I was not the family favorite in my immediate household. That was my baby brother. Yet Grandma saw something that others missed. She had a vision for me, a wish, a dream that I would somehow rise, overcome any of the impediments or obstacles currently existing in the world of our origin. She let me know that I was special and that somehow my future would put me in places that existed for people who lived in areas and looked different from us. Happily, my library card was my friend. Books and teachers carried me away to distant lands, introduced me to different people, environments and places free of the physical constraints and the vestiges of a racially and socioeconomically divided world. Even though I did not attend my first desegregated school until the advent of busing, I was constantly being transported across the globe to places promising to unlock restrictions. My passion for exploration was born here, with an understanding that the playing field was not universally scripted. I discovered that there were people in the world who could bolster one's hopes. Beyond my grandmother and teachers, I began to encounter others who would be cheerleaders and champions along the way. With enhanced technology and research, medical professionals altered approaches to my care. I was suddenly free to explore the world less restricted than before. This kid of the indoors was suddenly free to explore trees, parks, museums, hikes, sports, and friends. It was a delayed start, but eagerly embraced. Fortunately, I grew out of my asthma, breathing in fragrant air unrestrained in the midst of my new freedom. It was glorious. I made friends, opening my insular world, buddies, pals, playmates of different backgrounds and classes. We would hang out, ride bikes across the city, discovering variation of landscapes and neighborhoods bordering the River James. It was so cool experiencing such a changing world. I truly began to feel the freedom that was conveyed amid the broader changes taking place as social movements took hold from the 60s through the 70s. High school teachers helped to plant the seeds for possibilities. Of special note was my Russian teacher, Sarah Davidovna. As a frustrated language student, I recall rejecting all that she aspired for her students. Stuck in the reality of a world of perceived limitations. She challenged us to think of what could be, that we could escape the confines of Richmond. Finding myself standing in Moscow's Red Square for the first time almost a decade later brought me to tears of gratitude for her desire to push us to dream in ways that we could hardly understand at the time. My college years added so much more to opening my mind and world to the prospects of difference. Two professors of note were Bruce London and Margaret Huber Williamson, a sociologist and anthropologist. Bruce helped to reveal the complexities of society, the social structures that act to shape the conditions that we navigate as members of social groups. Margaret facilitated my understanding of culture, the factors encompassing the norms, beliefs, behaviors, and practices that influence communities and people. From this foundation, there began to be clarity in the world that I was a part of, understanding why the experiences across race, class, and gender were so different from one society or community to the next. Going to college, I thought that my destination would be law school. And I acknowledge the fortitude of the law graduates in this class. Ultimately, and thankfully for me, the world of liberal arts opened my mind to a different path. After undergraduate years at Mary Washington, I journeyed to UVA. This place founded by Jefferson to advance human knowledge, educate leaders, and cultivate an informed citizenry. A lark? No. A continuation of pursuing my grandmother's dream. She was aware of this place, although she did not live long enough to see me enroll. For her, UVA was a place of privilege for white kids. For her grandson to arrive on these grounds would have been almost unimaginable, although desired. As one of those places where it would have been dangerous to even be present during her time, it would offer to her grandson a path for further discovery and growth. Years after Walter Ridley had opened the doors for African Americans, I was here, a graduate student, roaming the academical village and wandering the halls of New Cabell. I immersed myself in this place, learning the traditions, the songs, dressing for football games, yes, we wore jackets and ties back then. Living in the dorms, Old, Page Emmett, New, Webb Watson, and Monroe Hill, Rogers. Finding faculty members, Steve Knock, Paul Kingston of the sociology department, and one of the most significant individuals who set me on the path to a career in higher education, English professor William Bill Elwood. I am here today because of Bill. Bill Elwood was a maverick, a force of nature. He so believed in the ability of UVA to serve a greater good, especially in its commitment to making sure that those who had previously been excluded were made welcome. He was the Associate Dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences when we met. I so remember rooms filled with students of color, gathering to register concerns about their experiences at UVA at the time, with Bill being the only white face in the room. His heart and head worked in tandem. He actively worked to enhance access to graduate programs by reaching out and visiting undergraduate schools across the country to spread the virtues of UVA. His own research culminated in the documentary, The Road to Brown, documenting the work of Charles Hamilton Houston, the legendary dean of the Howard University Law School and NAACP chief counsel, to build an army of civil rights attorneys, including future Justice Thurgood Marshall and jurist Oliver Hill. It was Elwood who redirected my path, steering me into a career of higher education. I had no idea at the time that his words to me over 40 years ago would ring so true in time. For you see, Bill often referred to me as Mr. UVA, often taking me out on the road with him, engaging prospective students at universities across the region. He would say, "You love this place more than any other student I know, even with all of its complexities. You truly believe in UVA's potential to transform and advance, to make the world better. I must find a way to get you to stay, somehow continue to serve this place." Bill helped me to land a position in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, continuing the work of broadening the representation and sense of belonging for students of all backgrounds, histories, and traditions. I had found my place and my cause, ultimately moving from admissions to student affairs, from engagements both inside and outside of the classroom to press forward inclusion and diversity. Empowering students to grow in advanced partnerships with both the familiar and unfamiliar, among those with commonalities and great differences, in an environment where uncertainties could be explored without condemnation, resulting in an ongoing thirst to learn and live in partnership with others, both alike and different. I guess that's why I'm here today. The path that I have taken, as stated at the beginning, was not planned, even uncertain. Thankfully, because of those who surrounded and championed me during this journey, I now stand in the space that I and members of my family would not have been permitted to occupy. Thankfully for the work of those individuals who touched my life directly, and generations of social justice champions who were steadfast in their efforts to bring us forward, UVA has come far. Let us not go backwards. Let us ever advance the benefits of such a magnificent array of students and scholars from across disciplines and professions to call this place home. We owe this to ourselves and our world. Yet it is clear that conditions today seem to harken back to periods not brimming with the virtues or the merits of an inclusive environment or world. We cannot let this tide of retrenchment turn back the clock on who we are as a community or university. The preamble of our cherished Constitution starts with the words, "We the people." These words are among the most inclusive ever written. As members of my queer and trans community have sloganized, these words mean all of the people. Let us not reject diversity. We are better, more powerful as an inclusive nation. It is up to you to help us as a nation and world to make sure that everyone matters, belongs, and is worthy of respect and dignity. I know some of you are thinking, okay, Boomer, you're one of the ones who mucked this up. Although your language would be different. Yes, some of us have. Yet, having lived among you in this amazing place, strolled these grounds in your company, shared some of the most compelling conversations with you in classrooms and meetings, debated with you on this very lawn, I know that you are in the best position to right the ship. You have lived through some of the most unsettling times and yet continue to endure and aspire. Your challenge: use the tools you have garnered during your time here across the multitude of schools, and programs, and professions, your expertise, creativity, and passion. Do not forget the sense of community and diversity of this place as you engage the world beyond these grounds. Remember the people who have made a difference, who help you to see things from perspectives that were new to you. How you have bridged connections that you now cherish. You possess something that my generation seems to have lost: hope, not fear. For some reason, fear has reared its ugly head in the current sphere. We should not fear or hold in disdain those who are different. As a first-gen gay Black man in America, I have benefited mightily from the richness of the mosaic of peoples I have had the opportunity to engage. Something that we can allay fear by turning back the clock, pushing aside decades of change. It will not. We cannot stop time, even as we seek to forestall the future. I have witnessed how hope lives amongst you. I think of how you came together as a community after the deaths of Lavelle, Deshawn, and Devin. You did not give up your dreams in the midst of COVID. One of my favorite days here at the University of Virginia was this past year, as I witnessed the majesty of this community, seeing how diverse souls spontaneously gathered from every quarter on the lawn to just gaze up in unison at the partial eclipse of the sun. Looking out at you, witnessing the procession down the lawn, collectively gathering in this space, so representative of the bounty of the diversity of our scholarly community, so reflective of the richness that the aspiration of inclusion adds to our world. What a phenomenal sight. I hope that UVA has evidenced a sense of belonging for you and those around you. Never forget how you have benefited from the myriads of diverse connections that you have established here. Continue to manifest that as you step beyond Jefferson's academical village, making those in communities that you will be a part of belong in kind. As my grandmother had unyielding faith, dreaming of a world that she could not see, she would intone, "Do you want to be bitter, or do you want to be better?" Let hope ever move you to act on behalf of a more inclusive world, ever more welcoming. Never retreat. Godspeed and wahoo-wah.
The President of the University.
Cedric, I think I speak on behalf of everyone in thanking you for those important, poignant, wise, and inspiring remarks. And I want to thank you for your amazing service to the university, especially in the role of Dean. We are going to miss you more than you know. Thank you. Before we confer degrees, I'd like to recognize the 55 students today who have earned their baccalaureate degrees in 3 years. As a symbol of their achievement, these students are wearing orange stoles today, and I would ask that those who are graduating early please stand so we can give you a well-deserved round of applause. I'd also like to recognize the 1,178 students who are the first in their families to graduate over the course of this weekend. As a fellow first-generation student, I can't tell you how delighted I am for you and how much I admire your accomplishments. Okay, we're getting down to business now. All of today's degree candidates are listed in the digital program, including those who completed the requirements for their degrees in December or last August. Today, we will award a total of 3,916 degrees with all the rights and privileges thereunto belonging. These include 1,563 baccalaureate degrees, 453 first professional degrees in law and medicine, and 1,900 graduate degrees, including 1,707 master's degrees and 193 doctoral degrees. The deans will now present the candidates for degrees, and under authority vested in the general faculty and delegated to me, I will then award the degrees. Here we go.
The interim executive vice president and provost of the university.
The dean of the School of Medicine.
The candidates for the degree of Doctor of Medicine will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Medicine.
I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Medicine. I charge you to use your training to heal the sick, sustain the well, and protect the welfare of the young, the old, and all who seek your care and counsel. Congratulations.
The doctors of medicine will please be seated. The candidates for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Biomedical Sciences will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Biomedical Sciences.
I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Biomedical Sciences. I charge you to use your knowledge and training to become leaders in your fields, advancing research, curing diseases, and educating the next generation of scholars. Congratulations.
Doctors of Philosophy in Biomedical Sciences will please be seated. The candidates for the degree of Master of Public Health or Master of Science in the School of Medicine will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Master of Public Health or Master of Science in the School of Medicine.
I confer upon you the degree of Master of Public Health or Master of Science, and I charge you to use your training, knowledge, and research to advance clinical care, patient outcomes, health care, and policies affecting our communities. Congratulations.
The Masters of Public Health and Masters of Science will please be seated. Congratulations, School of Medicine.
The dean of the School of Law.
The single candidate for the degree of Doctor of Juridical Science will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, as Dean of the School of Law, I have the honor to present this candidate who has fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Juridical Science.
I confer upon you, and yes, I do mean you, the degree of the Doctor of Juridical Science, and I congratulate you on the completion of the highest degree that can be earned in the study of law. I charge you to use your specialized training and research abilities to advance fair and equitable applications of the law. Congratulations.
The Doctor of Juridical Science will please be seated. The candidates for the degree of Master of Laws will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Master of Laws.
I confer upon you the degree of Master of Laws and charge you to use your advanced knowledge of the law in the pursuit of justice and the betterment of humankind. Congratulations.
The Masters of Laws will please be seated. The candidates for the degree of Juris Doctor will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Juris Doctor.
I confer upon you the degree of Juris Doctor, and I charge you to use your training and knowledge to preserve individual liberties, freedom, and justice through the process of the law. Congratulations.
The Juris Doctors will please be seated. Congratulations, Law School.
The Dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Science.
Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in the School of Engineering and Applied Science. And I'm sorry, I missed the line of asking you all to stand.
All right, is everyone standing? Who should be standing? All right. I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Philosophy, and I charge you to pursue discoveries and inventions for the betterment of humankind, to work at the frontiers of applied knowledge, and to communicate the excitement of science to the next generation. Congratulations.
The Doctors of Philosophy will please be seated. The candidates for master's degrees in the School of Engineering and Applied Science will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for master's degrees in the School of Engineering and Applied Science.
I confer upon you the appropriate master's degree in the School of Engineering and Applied Science and charge you to pursue rigorous research that advances modern technology and sustains human life. Congratulations.
The master's graduates of the School of Engineering and Applied Science will please be seated. The candidates for bachelor's degrees in the School of Engineering and Applied Science will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for bachelor's degrees in the School of Engineering and Applied Science.
I confer upon you the appropriate bachelor's degrees in the School of Engineering and Applied Science and charge you to use your knowledge and skills to transform the principles of science and mathematics into new and useful technologies. Congratulations.
The bachelor's graduates of the School of Engineering and Applied Science will please be seated. Congratulations, engineers. Make our world a better place.
the Dean of the Darden Graduate School of Business Administration.
The candidates for the degree of Master of Science or Master of Business Administration will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Master of Science or Master of Business Administration.
I confer upon you the degree of Master of Science or Master of Business Administration and charge you to promote innovation, equity, and ethical integrity in your leadership of the practical affairs of this nation and in the world. Congratulations.
The Masters of Science and Masters of Business Administration will please be seated. Congrats, Darden. Well done.
The Dean of the School of Architecture.
The candidates for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in the Constructed Environment will please stand. Mr. President, as Dean of the School of Architecture, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in the Constructed Environment.
I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in the Constructed Environment and charge you to encourage the prudent development and rigorous study of built human spaces through research, teaching, and design. Congratulations.
The Doctors of Philosophy in the Constructed Environment will please be seated. The candidates for the degree of Master of Architectural History, Architecture, Landscape Architecture, Urban Design, or Urban Environmental Planning will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, as Dean of the School of Architecture, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Master of Architectural History, Architecture, Landscape Architecture, Urban Design, or Urban and Environmental Planning.
I confer upon you the appropriate master's degree in the School of Architecture and charge that you shape rich and humane environments that acknowledge the heritage of the past while anticipating the needs of the future. Congratulations.
The Masters of Architectural History, Architecture, Landscape Architecture, Urban Design, and Urban Environmental Planning will please be seated. The candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Architectural History, Bachelor of Science in Architecture, or Bachelor of Urban Environmental Planning will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, as Dean of the School of Architecture, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Bachelor of Architectural History, Bachelor of Science in Architecture, or Bachelor of Urban and Environmental Planning.
I confer upon you the appropriate bachelor's degree in the School of Architecture and charge you to use your knowledge to preserve and shape environments that inform and magnify the quality of life itself. Congratulations.
The Bachelors of Architectural History, Bachelors of Science in Architecture, and Bachelors of Urban Environmental Planning will please be seated. Congratulations, A-School.
The Dean of the School of Nursing.
The candidates for the degree of Doctor of Nursing Practice and Doctor of Philosophy will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirement for the degree of Doctor of Nursing Practice or Doctor of Philosophy.
I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Nursing Practice or Doctor of Philosophy, and I charge you to apply your specialized knowledge and abilities to the work of enhancing the profession of nursing as you enter practice, teach aspiring nurses, and pursue research that will shape the future of healthcare. Congratulations.
The Doctors of Nursing Practice and Doctors of Philosophy will please be seated. The candidates for the degree of Master of Science in the School of Nursing will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Master of Science in the School of Nursing.
I confer upon you the degree of Master of Science, and I charge you to use your advanced knowledge and skills to promote the health and well-being of the individuals, families, and communities you serve. Congratulations.
The Master of Science will please be seated. The candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Science in the School of Nursing will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Bachelor of Science in the School of Nursing.
I confer upon you the degree of Bachelor of Science, and I charge you to promote human health and to strive to improve the lives of persons in need. Congratulations.
The Bachelor of Science will please be seated. Congratulations, School of Nursing.
The Dean of the McIntire School of Commerce. The candidates for the degree of Masters of Science in Accounting, Master of Science in Business Analytics, Master of Science in Commerce, or Master of Science in the Management of Information Technology will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, as the Dean of the Commerce School, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Master of Science in Accounting, Master of Science in Business Analytics, Master of Science in Commerce, or Master of Science in the Management of Information Technology.
I confer upon you the appropriate master's degree in the School of Commerce, and I charge you to boldly shape global business with integrity, purpose, and a fundamental understanding of how commerce can contribute to the common good. Congratulations.
The master's graduate of the McIntire School of Commerce will please be seated. The candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Science in the McIntire School of Commerce will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, as Dean of the Commerce School, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Bachelor of Science in the McIntire School of Commerce.
I confer upon you the appropriate bachelor's degree in the School of Commerce, and I charge you, as our next generation of business leaders, to consider how you can ethically transform society and fearlessly solve global challenges using commerce for the common good. Congratulations.
The Bachelors of Science will please be seated. Congratulations, class of 2025 from the Comm School.
The Dean of the School of Continuing and Professional Studies.
The candidates for the degree of Master of Public Safety will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Master of Public Safety.
I confer upon you the degree of Master of Public Safety. I charge you to think critically, reinforce democratic principles, serve the public, earn community trust, and help more people live from fear and harm. Congratulations.
The Masters of Public Safety will please be seated. The candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Interdisciplinary Studies or the Bachelor of Professional Studies in Health Sciences Management will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Bachelor of Interdisciplinary Studies or Bachelor of Professional Studies in Health Sciences Management.
I confer upon you the degree of Bachelor of Interdisciplinary Studies or Bachelor of Professional Studies in Health Sciences Management. I commend your commitment to lifelong learning, and I charge you to continue in that spirit as you further your education, pursue your career, and strive to reach your goals. Congratulations.
The Bachelors of Interdisciplinary Studies and Bachelors of Professional Studies in Health Sciences Management will please be seated. Congratulations, SCPS.
The Dean of the School of Data Science.
The candidates for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in the School of Data Science will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in the School of Data Science.
I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. I charge you to continue to stand out from the crowd, to elevate the lives and environs of those whose data you collect and analyze, to champion data privacy and ethics, and to advance the practice of data science ever onwards. Congratulations.
You lead us. The Doctors of Philosophy will please be seated. The candidates for the degree of Master of Science in the School of Data Science will please rise and remain standing. Mr. President, I have the honor to present these candidates who have fulfilled the requirements for the degree of Master of Science in the School of Data Science.
Okay, this is the very last one. I confer upon you the degree of Master of Science and charge you to use your knowledge and skills to continue exploring, analyzing, and safeguarding data to make discoveries to advance the world while treating data ethically and with regard to the privacy rights of individuals. Congratulations.
The Masters of Science will please be seated. Onwards and upwards.
Congratulations to the class of 2025.
the chair of the University of Virginia Alumni Association Board of Managers.
Just wow. Good morning, Wahoo graduates. That has a really nice ring to it, don't you think? You are forever the class of 2025. Congratulations on this very special accomplishment. You did it. Congratulations to your family and friends and network of support. This is a journey best traveled with others. I'm Tasha Daniels Granger, a very proud triple who this morning and chair of the Alumni Board of Managers. And on behalf of my fellow board members and the UVA Alumni Association team, I am thrilled and honored to officially welcome you to our alumni family. You are now part of a vibrant, dynamic, and growing community of more than 270,000 alumni across the globe. I know they are cheering you on today as well as you join the ranks of the most treasured assets of this great university. We truly are the secret sauce, or as President Ryan likes to say, our unfair advantage. We are all of that. When it comes to our alumni compatriots from other institutions, they're not like us. We are teeming with talent, creativity, resolve, ingenuity, and generosity. We uphold a very strong set of values seated right here at UVA. Those values are helping us actively shape the world around us. And we are a powerful force for good and great change that will define our future. We are an extraordinary group. And now you are bringing your talents to the family. Look around. You are celebrating today with people who will be your lifelong friends, who will impact your life in ways yet known, and you theirs. I can tell you from my own experience, your connection to these friends and UVA will only strengthen over time. On a personal note, there are 3 women that I met as a first-year student, and all these years later, we gather annually with our families to relive and share UVA memories while making new life memories. And now we even have a legacy among us. It's not just that annual gathering that has meant so much, it was all the times we were there for one another during life's journey. UVA was a transformational experience for me, but what I didn't realize as I sat where you are today all those years ago was that the best was yet to come. And so I predict the same for you. I encourage you to stay connected, strengthen the bonds, give back, and return often. May this next chapter bring you the joy and success you've worked so hard for. May you go out and explore new corners of the globe. May you always find your way back here to UVA, because the Alumni Association, in both spirit and space, is forever a home for every who. Again, congratulations, much joy, and wahoo-ah!
Before we close, I have a letter to read from the Seven Society. Dear President Ryan and members of the university community, on the occasion of final exercises, the Seven Society would like to congratulate the class of 2025. In your time at the university, you have not only pursued academic enrichment, but have also made a positive impact on the university community through your engagement in student self-governance and service to others. The Seven Society would also like to recognize the faculty, staff, and guests who poured their energy into the graduates here today, providing support and guidance through the moments of achievement, challenge, and growth. This past March marked the 200th anniversary of the university's first day of classes, a bookend milestone, and a 7-year bicentennial celebration. The student experience at the university is testament to its founding vision, an unwavering belief in the importance of an educated and practiced citizenry to the foundation of a successful democracy. To support the university's commitment to student self-governance and a complete student experience, the Seventh Society is pleased to announce a contribution to the university's Honor the Future campaign with a gift of $777.77 to the Cavalier Fund, which was created to ensure that all students may participate fully in that tradition and in the life of the university. Members of the class of 2025, in your years at the university, you have contributed to the student experience in ways big and small, including reestablishing the groundwork for a robust system of student self-governance as we emerged from the isolation of the pandemic, and you have served as community builders on grounds and beyond. As you walk down the lawn today and move forward to your new chapter, you should reflect fondly and with pride on your time here, knowing that you have made this place better for those who will follow. The Seventh Society thanks you for your many contributions and wishes you well as you engage new communities around the world with your time and energy. Congratulations, class of 2025, and now the president of the university.
Okay, I'm back, but this is the last time, I promise. I would like to thank the Seventh Society for that very generous and meaningful gift, which will help future students take advantage of everything UVA has to offer. I'd also like to thank Robert for his kind words and for his service on the board, especially these last 2 years as rector. And he deserves a large round of applause for his commitment to this university. And thank you, Tasha, for your remarks. We are incredibly fortunate to have a strong and tight-knit community of alumni whose time on grounds profoundly shaped their lives. And I'm grateful that so many of those alumni have worked hard to give others the same experience. I'd like to say a final thank you to all of today's speakers, as well as to our Grand Marshal, Professor Beth Meyer. Thank you all. I fully recognize that I am the only person standing between you and celebrating with your friends and family, which is why I've decided to keep my final remarks to a short and crisp 60 minutes. Actually, I have just one final and simple request for this graduating class, which is to carry this place and this community with you. By that I mean I hope you will remember what it felt like to be here, in this place, with these people, through joy and sorrow, triumph and heartbreak, and that you will carry that feeling with you. Carry with you what it felt like to be surrounded by a group of fellow students who were as compassionate as they were talented. Carry with you what it felt like to learn from professors who loved a subject so much you couldn't help but love it too. Carry with you what it felt like to live with some of the best friends you've ever made, who will walk alongside you for the rest of your lives. Carry with you the lessons you've learned, lessons about building bridges, about remaining curious, and about doing the right thing even when it's hard and even when no one is looking. Carry with you how it felt to serve others and to devote your time and energy to something bigger than yourselves. Carry with you what it felt like to be part of an incomparably strong community of trust, and continue to live your life with honor. For some, carry with you what it felt like to streak the lawn, but please don't make it a habit. And finally, Carry with you the memory of this day, of what it felt like to live the lawn, knowing above all else that you can do hard things because you have already done hard things. If you remember all of this, I have no doubt that you will carry the very best of this place with you as you face with courage and with purpose the beautiful, joyous, challenging, sometimes tragic, and inevitably surprising road ahead. And should that road ever lead you back to Charlottesville, as I hope it will, please know that we will leave the lights on for you. Congratulations, class of 2025.
Department ceremonies will begin after graduates and their guests have ample time to reach their ceremony sites. And graduates, before then, please stand for the singing of the good old song.